Why the path feels narrower today. The world became louder. In the previous discussion, we talked about false teachers and authority hijacking. But that raises another question. Why does deception seem easier today than in previous generations? Why do so many people feel confused, divided, or spiritually disoriented? Scripture says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction." Matthew 7:13-14. But perhaps the path to truth has not become narrower. Perhaps the world around it has become louder. For truth doesn't bend or break, but desires, opinions, manipulation can change perception of truth. The human brain was not built for this. For most of human history, information moved slowly. Knowledge came from family, community, lived experience, local teachers. A person might encounter dozens of competing ideas in their lifetime. Today, the average person consumes tens of thousands of pieces of information every day. A well-known statistic from the University of California, San Diego, estimated that the average American consumes the equivalent of over 30 gigabytes of information daily. That's more information in a single day than many people encountered in an entire lifetime just a few centuries ago. The human brain did not evolve for infinite input. When input overwhelms processing capacity, clarity fragments. Attention is now an industry. Modern technology operates on something called the attention economy. Companies compete for one resource above all else: your focus. The longer you stay engaged, the more valuable your attention becomes. Psychologists and former technology designers have spoken openly about this. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, explained that many digital platforms are engineered to exploit psychological triggers such as variable rewards, novelty, social validation, outrage, fear. These mechanisms activate dopamine systems in the brain, the same systems involved in habit formation and addiction. The result? Distraction becomes engineered. Shorter attention spans. Research from Microsoft's Consumer Insights report found that the average human attention span dropped from about 12 seconds in the early 2000s to roughly 8 seconds today. For comparison, a goldfish is often humorously cited as having a similar attention span. Whether or not that comparison is exact, the trend is clear. Sustained attention is becoming harder. Deep thought requires focus. Focus requires quiet. But modern environments reward constant stimulation. Algorithms shape perception. Another major factor is algorithmic filtering. Most online platforms use recommendation systems that learn from user behavior. If you click on certain topics repeatedly, the algorithm feeds you more of the same. Over time, a feedback loop forms. Your information environment narrows. Psychologists call this a confirmation bias amplifier. You begin to see mostly the ideas you already agree with, which can make disagreement feel like hostility instead of discussion. And truth becomes harder to evaluate. Information without wisdom. Access to information has never been greater, but access to wisdom has not increased at the same rate. We have more data, more opinions, more commentary, but less reflection. Ecclesiastes observed something similar thousands of years ago. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Ecclesiastes 12:12. The problem was not knowledge itself. It was overload without grounding. The rise of performative authority. In the digital age, authority is often measured by visibility, followers, views, virality. But popularity does not necessarily equal truth. A person may gain influence through charisma, emotional messaging, confidence, controversy. And once influence grows, audiences often interpret it as expertise. This dynamic allows misinformation to spread quickly. Researchers at MIT published a study in the journal Science showing that false information spreads significantly faster on social media than accurate information. Not because people prefer lies, but because novelty and emotion drive engagement. Biblical warnings about information overload. Interestingly, ancient texts anticipated this problem. Daniel 12:4 contains a phrase often discussed in this context. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Whether interpreted literally or metaphorically, the idea is striking. An age of rapid movement, an age of exploding knowledge, an age where understanding struggles to keep pace. Another warning appears in 2 Timothy 4:3-4. For the time will come when people will not endure sound teaching, but will gather teachers to suit their own desires. In other words, information will increase, but discernment will decrease. Digital idols. Throughout history, idolatry has taken many forms: kings, statues, empires. Today, it often takes subtler forms: public figures, ideological movements, internet personalities. Algorithms amplify these figures, and communities form around them. Loyalty grows, and sometimes that loyalty replaces independent thinking. Anything finite, treated as ultimate, creates instability, because only the ground of being can bear ultimate loyalty. Why the path feels narrow. So perhaps the path has not narrowed. Perhaps the world has simply become crowded with noise, crowded with opinions, crowded with competing authorities. Truth often requires patience, reflection, and humility. But distraction rewards speed, certainty, and emotional intensity. In a noisy environment, quiet signals are harder to hear, which makes clarity feel rare. Guarding attention. If alignment with truth begins anywhere, it begins with attention. What you repeatedly focus on shapes your perception. Perception shapes belief. Belief shapes action. So protecting attention becomes essential, not through isolation, but through discernment, choosing carefully what you allow to shape your thinking. There is another dimension to this conversation that is often overlooked: stillness. In a distracted environment, stillness becomes rare. And yet, stillness is one of the most powerful tools for clarity. Modern neuroscience has discovered something interesting about the brain. When external stimulation decreases, the brain activates what researchers call the default mode network. This network becomes active during quiet reflection, introspection, and deep thought. It is associated with meaning-making, self-awareness, and long-term understanding. In other words, when the noise quiets down, the mind becomes capable of deeper insight. But modern environments rarely allow that. Endless notifications, endless scrolling, endless stimulation. The mind becomes constantly reactive instead of reflective. And reflection is where discernment grows. Ancient wisdom traditions understood this long before neuroscience did. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still, and know that I am Elohim." Notice the order. Stillness first, recognition second. Stillness allows awareness to settle. Another verse echoes this idea in a different way. In 1 Kings 19, the prophet Elijah encounters a powerful wind, then an earthquake, then fire. But the presence of God is not found in the noise. It comes in what the text describes as a still, small voice. The implication is profound. Truth often arrives quietly, but noise dominates attention, which means without intentional stillness, clarity becomes harder to recognize. In an age of constant stimulation, stillness becomes a form of resistance, a way to reclaim attention, a way to hear what the noise tries to drown out. Perhaps the narrow path was never hidden. It was simply quieter than the noise surrounding it. The age of distraction is not simply technological. It is psychological. It is cultural. And it is spiritual. But the ground of being has not changed. Reality still rests on the same foundation. Truth still exists. Clarity still exists. The challenge is not finding it. The challenge is hearing it in a world that never stops talking. With that being said, one thing we must consider in all of this is conditioning. The human mind is constantly absorbing patterns from the information, language, and emotional tone surrounding it. Neuroscience shows that repeated exposure strengthens neural pathways. The more we hear or see something, the more familiar and believable it can begin to feel. Psychologists often refer to this as cognitive imprinting and conditioning. Words matter because they frame reality. The language used in media, conversations, and culture subtly shapes how we think, what we expect, and even how we interpret truth. Scripture reflects this principle in Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Words can build wisdom, courage, and clarity, but they can also plant fear, division, and confusion. Over time, repeated messages, whether true or false, can settle into the mind as assumptions. Words become songs, songs become mantras, and those can become spells. This is why discernment is vital in an age of constant information. What we listen to repeatedly does not simply inform us, it forms us. So, be careful what you give your mind to, for nothing in existence can exist without its influence. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, comment, share with your loved ones, your family now. And please, join us for our next video as we get into alignment. What does it mean to live in truth? We love you. Take care. And I'll see you there.